And this method for before you rough down, putting those little biting cuts in. Anyone know why you would do it?
Keep them splitting.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that way there, actually what I did was I came backwards, and that doesn't cause a long split. But if I had gone that way, I could have had a split off the whole length of the piece, so it could be quite dangerous. It could actually fly up and hit you in the face or something. So what I did was I went backwards. Now, that's one method of roughing down safely, very quickly and safely, but this is the other. If you put these two cuts in first, or cuts every 50 millimetres, every 2 inches, then what happens is the longest split you can get is going to be that long. Okay, so I'll do it slowly again, just so you can see. You don't need to do them closer than 2 inches, but can you see on that up there how I've got my tool? You can't really, can you?
Pretty well.
I'm just wondering, would it be go faster than that normally, unless those factors come into play, because we want to run the lathe as fast as possible as long as it's safe and it's workable. So we don't want lots of vibration. So if for any reason you get lots of vibration, slow it down. Okay? Right, that's why I did that. Now coming back to this system, what I'll do is I'll just do this biting cut again. Can you see up there? Yeah. I've got the tool being almost flat, but I'm going to roll it right onto its side. So it ends up virtually vertical. Right? I'll do it again. Now you can do it with the deep fluted roughing gouges just the same. They become almost upside down though by the time you finish, but it's not dangerous. Just try it and be careful and you'll find it's not awkward to do. Now if you do those biting cuts every 2 inches, then you can run along this way and you won't chip out. Or you'll have short chips, so it's not dangerous. The way I did it though was I actually started that way. That's called a back cut. If you do that, it doesn't send chips out this way, and so it's safe as well. And that's the method that I would normally use to reduce a square block down to a cylinder.
Where exactly are you cutting on?
Sorry?
Where exactly is the actual cut though?
Can you see it on the...
Not quite. I'm trying to figure out...
In there.
Right in the center?
No, it's because I've got it angled, it's touching about here. But it's not that critical.
All right.
Honestly, with the roughing gouge, it doesn't matter much. However, it's a different matter if I was to come back like that, because if I'm doing that,
yeah.
I'm cutting in the same spot on the other side, then I could have my long splinter, you see. Once it's down to this stage, it's all right actually. Now it's safe. You can go either way with impunity and you're not going to have problems. But in that initial cut, I would not like to present it that way. So you can see, I think it's finished with this. If I present it that way,
yeah, I
could easily blow out the whole length. But that way, I can't. All right? Right. What I'm doing here is I'm just bringing this down to a cylinder. This is what we're going to do here is turn up a leg from around about 1600 BC. This is about the beginning of woodturning. I'm just being a little careful here because I'm not used to this lathe. Well, I'm used to this lathe. I've got one like this at home, but I'm not used to the this is a different stand and everything. Yeah. So I'll go a little bit slow till I get my eye in. If you put your fingers on the lathe, on the wood, to feel if it's round or not, don't put the point on. If you put the point on, it could get caught and dragged down between the tool rest and the wood. It's a bit dangerous, and also you could get splinters in the end of your finger. It's a bit more risky. But there, it's pretty safe, around the second knuckle. If you don't want to touch the wood at all while it's spinning, you can do this. It's bouncing, so it's actually still not round.
Now you said this lathe was done, that many thousands of years ago.
Sorry?
Since that was very old, how did they turn wood? I mean...
Okay, good question.
By hand?
I doubt it.
what they did in principle was something like this. You can help me if you don't mind. You're sure you've asked the question. If you can just, we'll have this down there here. Pull and push. Yeah, it's not set up properly here. We haven't got the right shape for you, but I'll see if we can do it. Oh, sorry. It's still turning up. Okay, keep it tight.
Oh, I see.
I'm only presenting the tool as the wood's rotating towards me, okay? Can you see from back there?
Well, they didn't have ball bearing surfaces to hold the ends though. So.
What they have is just 2 spikes.
Okay.
That's all,
Yeah,
just
just
2
two
spikes,
holes.
fixed spikes.
Wow.
I've got a picture here.
So they had it took 2 people to do this.
Yeah, there we go. Actually, there's a picture of you there. Yeah. That's the same head.
Wow. Yeah.
I'll be there in another couple of years.
Yeah. Didn't they also use a foot pedal?
That came in a lot later.
Okay.
Right? It took thousands of years for that to come in.
Yeah, in the 1700s, they were using foot pedal. I don't know if they did before that or not.
This is a picture. This is the earliest picture we had of a lathe. This was on an Egyptian tomb,
Really?
and it was carved into the tomb. And you see the lathe is vertical.
Yeah.
But you see this bloke's got a rope here, doing just
Yeah.
what you were doing.
Yeah.
Though whoever drew it didn't bother to put the rope around the spindle. It has to be wrapped around. It doesn't work the way they've drawn it there. That was just a case of an artist who didn't bother with the technical stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But it's the same principle. It's just that it's vertical. But I think I would say that's the earliest kind of lathe, probably. Where it comes from is, I suspect, I don't know this for sure, but I suspect it comes from this. Maybe you can just give me another idea if you don't mind. We get someone else to just hold the wood still, and you can pull and push.
Okay. Can somebody else?
Actually, I'll hold the wood. If you can send to that side there, just wrap it around again. I'll press down. I want you to pull fairly firmly, but once I go down again. That, oh, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I do need someone else to hold this. Can someone else hold this so I can...
Yeah.
The reason it needs 3 people is because I don't know what I'm doing here very well, okay?
Oops, I got this rope. Never mind.
Oh, can you see? You're in the way there.
No, I can see.
This is a drill, right? This is the earliest kind of machine. Sorry.
Just a hand.
I think
We well insured there?
Well insured.
Yeah, I would say that what happened was one day some carpenter was drilling. This came in about 3000 BC. And his kid, if the kid is anything like my 10-year-old daughter, would have come up while he was working, and she would have probably, I'd say, held some bit of metal while this was spinning, and he may have thought, she's actually putting a pattern on the wood while the drill's spinning. Maybe that's how I can put patterns on my handles. And it's not a big jump, is it, from a drill like that to a lathe, because it's the same principle. If you've got this spinning and you're holding that against it, then suddenly you've got your vertical lathe. I guess that's how it might have started, but I don't really know. But yeah, we won't be going back that far. We're sort of into the guesswork area. But this one, which I showed you before, that's actually from India. That's a picture from the 19th century in India. And in fact, some people in some parts of the world still turn like that.
Really?
And you can see he uses his foot. But sometimes they don't. The next step in the history of lathes was to have a bow around the work, like a bow and arrow bow.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can do it. You can do it yourself. I've done it myself. You can push and pull and turn with one hand, so you don't need a helper, which has got a lot going for it because it's obviously more economical. Okay. What I'm doing is I'm just eyeballing it, but I'll be a bit more accurate now. I've got a pattern here which I'm going to present to the work, and I'll mark key point of detail. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a little bit of a curve in here. Make sure I remember the shape. what I'm aiming at here is to put a very gradual curve, not one that, thanks, not one that's going to be really, really distinct. I'm looking for subtlety. I'm looking for a shape which is almost straight, but it's got a very slight curve in it. And I want to do, this is the interesting bit here. So where'd that pencil gauge go? When you picked it up, where did you put that?
I didn't.
Right, now this is a very plain shape. It was a stool leg. Comes from Egypt, and it was dated 1600 BC. And there's not much to it. It's very boring, except for two things, I think. One is, three things. One is that it's got that subtle curve, and if you have a look at furniture very closely, you'll find that a lot of furniture has subtleties in it which draw the eye back for a second look. If you make it dead straight, it's boring, and you know what the shape is. Sorry about this.
Oh,
That goes in
right
there.
in there.
Right, there's just a slight curve in there. Now, when your eye moves over a piece of furniture, you may not be aware of this, but what generally happens is your brain's working while you're not aware of it and analysing what it sees. And if that's dead straight, the brain knows that instantly, virtually instantly. You understand that. Or if, for example, you put this little bit of detail exactly in the middle, then your brain knows that. And it doesn't come back for a second look. It doesn't need to. It's already analysed what it sees. So that's why we put these subtleties in. That slight curve is just ambiguous enough so that the eye comes back for a second look. Now this is a very simple shape, but it's just got that little subtlety, and also it's the position of this that's critical. See, it's not in the middle. And similarly, the start of that cut is not in the middle. And that's fairly important, because this one here is actually not a third of the way either. It's close to a third of the way, but not quite. Does anyone know exactly what proportion that is?
About 2/5.
60-40?
Yeah, close. 2/5, 60-40. It's called the golden mean. I thought the golden mean was originated with the Greeks, but the golden mean actually goes way back to Egypt, at least to this time, and that's approximately 61.8 out of 100, or 3 out of 5 is close. Okay, 3 out of 5 would be 60 out of 100, but it's actually about 61.8 is a closer approximation. 5/8 is another close approximation. That would be 62.5 out of 100. Yeah, I just think this is interesting because of those two subtleties. And it just creates just enough ambiguity to draw the eye back for a second look. Now, what really intrigued me when I first saw this one, though, was that it had lots of scored lines on it. I won't actually score them. I'll just mark them with a pencil. But they were like this. These were actually hand incised. They weren't cut on the lathe, which is what really amazed me. Now, if I wanted to score lines in there, I would just do it like this. Pretty quick, isn't it? But the originals of this stool, they were all cut by hand. So what someone did was they may have mounted in the lathe, perhaps. No, they probably would have had to do it elsewhere, I think. Surely if they mounted the lathe, they would have turned the lathe, they would have got someone pulling and pushing, but they were actually cut like that. And they weren't accurate, they were uneven. Why would that be? I don't know if anyone's got any ideas, but why would you turn a piece like this and then then pick up a tool and by hand do this?
Added subtlety.
Sorry?
Added subtlety.
Yeah.
It makes it, like you say, it draws your eye back in there, makes you want to look why they did it that way.
Give somebody else a job.
That's.
Probably maybe a slave was the one that put the. I'm going to pass it around. What I'd like you to do is just have a look at the difference between the hand-incised stuff, which I've just done very roughly. But the original was rough.
It also adds interest. Now, like on some new furniture now, they're deliberately putting in dents and things in it,
Yeah,
so it looks like it's kind of antique.
yeah.
Because it has more,
Character.
yeah, character is what they call it.
Or maybe they didn't feel that turning on a lathe was art and that doing it by hand was.
Yeah, exactly.
Is
I
that
think
what it-
you're
is
right.
that the reason?
That's probably it, yeah. I think
Really?
we'll pay that one.
No, the other thing is that they might have wanted to save the strength of whoever was doing it. Turn like this and so.
And you was talking about not putting that on center, back, about 1965, I took a course at a professional photography school, and they said in the composition to never make things even or a mirror image or anything like that, because they're very unrestful.
Yeah,
That your eye just keeps going back and forth. If you make it off center, the picture and things, that it's more restful. And you never, put two things. I've seen a lot of people, they'll plant some plants around a window, and they'll put exactly the same plant on both sides of the window, and some lower ones through the middle of it, and it is not very restful for the eyes.
well,
It's
this
uninteresting.
is a typical piece of furniture turning on a small scale, and admittedly that's a small scale too, by the way. I've reduced the scale of virtually all this stuff because it's more manageable for demos, but that's not symmetrical, is it, around
Yeah.
the middle? It's elongated, and that's traditional for furniture. However, for horizontal pieces of furniture, often you will find that they're mirror images. So a horizontal piece of furniture may look, the same left and right. So you could even have, for example, underneath a table, you may see something like this, but in the same pattern this way, so that it's. And I don't know really why the convention is, because what you say is a very good point, I'm sure. Yeah, it's very rarely done for vertical turnings. Just one more point about this leg, which I think is also interesting before we leave it. When I came across an article with a really good photograph of that, I was intrigued by the photograph because I thought, this might be a clue as to whether it was turned or scraped. Cut or scraped. And the little hollow that's along there, that was really sharply defined in the photograph. And this indicated to me perhaps that it was cut rather than scraped. But I can't be certain, but I wouldn't be surprised because it was super sharp, beautiful, couldn't be better. That's a bit of a mystery. We do know that they did sand work back then, though often furniture components weren't sanded. But they actually, the way they sanded work was sometimes they held a sandstone rock against the work, and as the work spun, they held it. Other times they got shark skin and held it against the work, and the shark skin was abrasive enough to sand it.
Now, you say you teach these courses in Australia.
Yeah.
In what kind of a venue? Are you
It's like
part
a
of
college.
university group, or
It's not a university, it's a college,
Is it a
like a
trade?
community college.
so it's more? Is it more of a trade school?
It's a trade school. We don't teach any of this, by the way.
Well, I was going to say it seems it's unusual to me to have somebody who's skilled mechanically with their hands like this be so in depth in the history and the growth of that.
I've got deep psychological problems. Yeah, no, I am very interested in history, but that's just me. We don't teach much of this in our course. Yeah, what I should say about the course, as far as I know, it's the only place in the English-speaking world where you can do a trade wood-turning course. I don't think there's anywhere in the United States where you can, not that I'm aware of. Correct me if I'm wrong. But there are people teaching in the United States. For example, John told me he went out to Utah and he did a course there for a week. You can do courses like that, but to do a full trade course, to be certified like you're certified as an electrician, we certify our wood turners. I don't think there's a course like that anywhere here, or in Canada, or in England. I believe there is a course in Germany, but I don't know a lot about it. I'm not quite sure how much depth they go into. But Hans Weissflog, some of you may have heard of Hans, the one who makes the boxes. He's actually a graduate of that course in Germany. And Ziggy Ungra, who was at the AAW symposium in Akron, he also was a graduate of that course. But as far as I know, it's the only course in the English-speaking world. And yeah, we focus very much on commercial turning, very much. We don't really do much on what could be called artistic turning. We don't do stuff like John Jordan does. But we do things like spill turning or bases for lampstands or bowls sometimes, but not so much the arty ones, more the conventional ones. Candlesticks, stuff like that. I'll do a couple of pieces which later on which are like the kind of things that we teach.
So are you looking then at the speed in production?
Yeah.
I mean, so replication over and over.
Well, what our students have to do is they have to draw everything that they're going to make. They have to draw it very accurately. They have to draw it the same as the drawing we give them, copy basically, copy a drawing. Then they have to make it exactly the same. And the standard that we look for is, it may sound unbelievable, but we actually want them to get within a 50th of an inch everywhere on the workpiece. The best ones can do that. Some of them don't quite make that, but if they can't get within about a 25th of an inch, then they don't pass the course. So it's we actually don't want speed, we want accuracy initially, but when they go out into the trade, then they get the speed because they've got to get fast to make a living. But we want them to do accurate stuff so that they can restore anything. Someone brings them a valuable piece of furniture with a leg damage, they can replace that leg to look exactly like the other three. Just to work from technical drawings, the same as an engineer. The standards an engineer would apply. Now, hand wood turning often isn't quite that accurate, but sometimes it has to be. Which brings me back to the point I started with on this one. Some people think that accurate work is the province of the 20th century. Well, these legs, the 4 legs on this stool, were within a millimetre and a half, which is a 16th of an inch everywhere. The greatest variation in diameter on the 4 legs was within a 16th of an inch. It's pretty good going, isn't it, really? So I think a lot of people would be happy if they could turn 4 legs where not one part, if you chose that point or the bottom of the hollow or the low point here, and you've got calipers on, you check all 4 legs, the greatest variation would be a 16th. It's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, I turned 6 or 7 and then take the best 4.
That's what we say in our course to the students. They give us, we say you've got to turn 4 legs all the same from that drawing, right? And they come back and we said, oh, you've done 4 legs, but I said 4 the same. Go back and do a few more. All right, we'll move on from that.
My first leg, I took a 15 inch by 3 by 3 hunk of beautiful maple and made a pencil out of it.
That's good. You made more than shavings, which is what I may have ended up with my first one, I think. What we'll go on to next is I'll do a little bit of stuff. But this is what we teach our students. A little bit of stuff on turning technique. Well, that's not going to fit, is it?
Here.
This is 3 or 4 inches long.
No, the other one, John. The other
The other 4. The big one. There you go.
Well, I sometimes wonder about our American system of teaching. I know a German fellow that he apprenticed in Germany as a cabinet maker, and his first assignment was they handed him several files of block of wood, and said make a plane like that. There's nothing but the two, or these files, and they measured it with micrometers, made sure it came to exactly the right dimensions. And then when he got the block, the right squareness and size and all, then they gave him the chisels and the hammer, said, okay, now cut the holes for the blades and all. But there's a difference in the quality of work when they're finished and over our system. They just say make something similar.
Rough enough's good enough, eh?
Yeah.
Okay, is the binding cut? But if I don't want to do that, I just do this. With this little tool rest, you could consider making another one. Once I've done that first cut, I can go back that way safely. You could consider making another one. It would make it easier for demos, I think, if you had a longer one. Well, I've made one for my lathe, which is exactly the same. And yeah, it's long enough, it works. The central pillar is thick enough to cope with that length. It actually is stable. So, right now, we're just going to look a little bit more at technique, I don't know if they did this back 3,000 years ago, but what I aim to do when I cut is to cut at a tangent to the circle, which you see at the end of the work. Now, that's the circle. I want to cut at a tangent, which is the line that just touches the edge of the circle. Sorry, is that better? Yeah, the tangent is the line that just touches the edge. It doesn't go through it like that. It doesn't go above it. So I want the tool to be cutting like that, so that the line between there and there, is just touching the edge. If you're at a true tangent, no cutting will happen, but you just got to raise the hand a little bit and suddenly it'll cut. That's what I'm doing. I must thank Bonnie Klein, by the way, for 7 years ago I saw Bonnie using this kind of thing and I thought it's a great idea. So what I'm doing here is I want that bevel, not the tool itself, but the bevel, to be just touching the circle, like that. If it's up there, no cutting happens. If I raise the handle to there, it starts to cut. Now, it's the most efficient way to cut. I think most people, when they start wood turning, tend to go in a bit more like that. And it's a temptation that I think it's worth resisting, because the quality of the finish is significantly different. What I'm just going to do, I know some of you know all this stuff, okay, and I apologise, but there are probably one or two here I imagine who are fairly... Are there people here who are new to turning? Anyone who's...
Relatively, 4 or 5 months.
Oh, you know.
We're all
about
beginners.
Yeah.
How many people here have been turning less than 4 or 5 months? Okay, I'll pitch it a bit higher. I'm probably going a bit simple there.
Well, I don't know, for me, it never hurts to go back and start from the beginning.
Okay.
Yep.
Right, now, this is a roughing gouge. What I'm going to do is I'm just put this very rough there, quick. I'll do it even a bit more. That's a pretty rough finish. I can get a better finish with this tool if I take it slowly with a light cut. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pick up the skew chisel and try and get a better finish again. So we're moving along from very rough to hopefully very smooth.
I notice you still have a very sharp point both on the heel and the toe of that tool. And
You're going.
And I've always been concerned about catching the tool.
We'll come to that in a few minutes, all right? Okay, what I want to just do is pass that around so you can have a look at it and see the difference. The reason I forget to undo this is because on my lathe, that's loose there. And out this way it means it's locked, and I'm always assuming it's loose.
Well, it's my understanding you only catch on the lead edge. The trail edge you don't catch on.
Oh, I could. It can, depending on how you present the tool. We'll come to that. We'll do that now then. Have I got another blank here for... I'll use one of these. Oh, should show you another way of doing that. I'm just eyeballing the centres, but some people rule diagonals. But what we teach our students to do is to just make their own marking gauge with their fingers by doing this. It's a very quick, accurate way. It's actually more accurate doing that than ruling the diagonals. If you don't believe me, just practice a couple of times and see. One of the problems with the diagonals is that the wood is often waney edged, or it's not machined dead square, and it's very difficult to get those diagonals perfect. If you could get them perfect, if you had a beautifully machined piece of wood, then that's an accurate method, but it's still slow. This is very quick. And if you set your finger gauge too small, you still have a square there, which is pretty easy to find the centre of just by looking at it. So you don't have to get exactly halfway. It works quite quickly and it's quite good. But I don't bother with it normally. I just guess it now. And if super accuracy isn't required, the guess is good enough.
It'll be accurate after you turn it anyway.
Yeah. The only...
As long as they're not putting a pommel in it.
Have we got some Loctite? Loctite's probably too strong, but maybe... do you need to have this coming out? We can glue it in, it'll stay there.
Get some super glue there.
Yeah, there's some in a little box.
I mean, it never needs to come out, does it?
No.
So you might as well glue it in and
Put a little thin stuff on it.
Thin or stick?
Thin.
It's
Got a wrench.
This is not gonna break loose.
You want to leave it, that's why it's tight, I've probably gone too far.
You want rag? Well, yeah, you can hold on to it then.
Yeah.
He's got some the other, don't you?
What's that?
Get the paper.
Yeah, I don't want it to fly out when I turn it on. You've got it on your hand, is it?
No, it's dry on my
If
hand.
you want fun, get some of that glue on your fingers and then put some.
I'm glad it's dry on your hand.
And it's
Oh,
not
well,
together.
we got the
I
salt.
like it already, the blue.
Yeah, I could use it a little bit.
Uh-huh.
I could use it a little bit.
Paper towel will do that.
Sometimes this vibrates loose, and maybe we should glue this in so it can't vibrate loose. With this little lathe, I'm probably sounding critical because I said you could make a longer tool rest. I don't mean to be critical, but I found that I needed to tune mine up. I put a longer handle on there. I turned a wooden handle, so it's easy then to lock it really securely, and you don't hurt the heel of your hand. It's banging down. And yes, what else did we do? And actually, it was a pretty good lathe. I must say I was very impressed with it when I got it, and I use it for demonstrations if I'm going out to a school or something. There was one or two other things. Maybe they'll come back to me and I'll bring on those. It might look like what I'm doing here is a bit cavalier, I'm being a bit rough. It may look like I'm not worrying about cutting in a tangent, but I actually am. In slow motion, what I'm doing is this, starting with the tool too high, raising it until I see a shaving and then going all like that. You probably don't notice that I'm doing it quickly, but in fact that's what I'm trying to do. There's something strange there. I'm just not really familiar with this wood. If I feel something odd or I hear something odd, I stop the lathe and look because it could be a split or something. And I'm not used to this wood, so I'm just being a little bit. Oh, I know what it is. It's not the wood, it's the tool. Okay, we go to sharpening now. Should be a slipstone somewhere. Sorry?
What's a slipstone?
The slipstone is it's probably in a little sock. Where did I put that? No, here it is.
The oil is in the box, I think.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Okay. What's happened is I've, because the tool rest is a bit short, I slipped off the end of it and damaged the point of the tool. And what I do is I grind my tools and then hone them after that. I put a little nick in it where I slipped off the end, but I won't bother re-grinding it, I'll just hone it and I'll live with that nick. I think that'll be enough. Is it okay if I put that there, or is that... This is pretty clean actually, isn't it? I don't want to put oil on it. Or should I wipe it off each time? Or maybe just put another one down. Okay. Now I've forgotten what we started to do here. What are we doing? We're talking about catching, long point or short point, right. Okay. When I'm setting the tool, this is how I use them. Is this what you talk about, using the skew?
Yeah. It's the hardest tool I've had to learn how to use, and I don't think I've learned how to use it yet.
All right, well what we're going to do,
Like me.
I'd like to focus on the skew today more than anything else. But I've been doing a lot of talking. How about some people here who've got some ideas on the skew? Tell us what your ideas are first, and then we'll talk about them. Anyone got any suggestions as to how to avoid catches?
Don't use it.
Trash.
Don't use it. Yeah.
Well, I've heard that you can, if you put a curve as opposed to having it exactly straight across, is better. Doesn't make it as
I tried it both
susceptible to
ways and I
catching.
still catch.
In
you
convex,
can
cave
do
or
that,
convex?
yeah. Sorry?
A concave curve or convex one?
Convex,
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
They won't keep you from making them, but you'll still make them.
I think you're right. I don't think that solves the problem. I think it can help a bit, but I don't think it solves it.
But does it help to round the points off and that?
That's the same kind of approach. I think it will help a bit, but it won't solve it.
No, it won't solve it.
But I actually don't want to round the points off because I want to be able to do this.
Yeah.
So it's been like the storm light.
I use the point for that, so I would like to keep that point for that purpose.
Well, on the skew chisel, I like Bonnie's terminology, the ABCs of the skew: anchor, bevel, cut. Anchor the tool on the tool rest, get the bevel to rub, and then perform your cut. And if you do it in that sequence, and Ernie is doing it, he's feeling for that. He gets it on the tool rest, feels the bevel rubbing, and then makes the cut. And then that won't prevent dig-ins, but it will increase the time between dig-ins.
And what I find happens to me the most is, it's probably just not focusing or paying close enough attention or concentrating. But as I make the cut and I'm coming off of it and I'm done, that seems to be where I do the catching more than any place else, as I'm trying to take it off the piece.
Yeah, I think that tends to happen because when you're releasing it, you're not pressing, like not anchoring, like you said the first time. You're actually, as you release it, you get a little bit, if there's a slightest shake in your hand,
Yeah.
it's the tool's moving. Once it moves,
You can't predict what will happen.
yeah, it's the, if you hold it that way, it's touching, sorry, it's touching down the bottom here, just below the arrow.
Mhm.
If you rock it at all, now you're not going to rock it that much, but you might make a micro rock, and then
Yeah.
suddenly it's touching at a different point. That's when
Mhm.
you tend to get those catches when you're releasing it. I think it's just a matter of practicing being very smooth in your release when you come off. But I like the way John's tried to tackle this because I think it's technique, not the shape of the tool, that's generally causing the problem. I would say 99% of the causes of dig-ins are its technique. I think if you really analyse your technique, you'll very rarely have them. Now, I don't have many dig-ins anymore. Of course, once I say that, you know it's going to happen.
You go ahead.
But I don't have them very often, and I think it's because the way I was taught. It's not that I worked it out myself, it's basically just what I was taught. When I cut in this smoothing action here, not turning a bead, but just smoothing a cylinder or turning a gradual curve with a skew, I'm cutting where the arrow is. Right? I want the shavings to be cut off around here.
Mhm.
If they're coming off right in the point, you've got two problems. One is you get an inferior finish. It's not. Where's that one I passed around, by the way? That one there, thanks. Yeah. What I'll do is I'll put this one back on and I'll cut with the point. And you can see that the standard is not quite as high, the standard of finish.
But
Secondly, you've got more chance of a dig-in too.
But cutting more off towards the top too, I think, instead of more down towards the center. I found getting up closer to the top edge cutting.
Is a problem, you're saying?
No, it's easier for me.
Ah, right. That's interesting. Well, I'll come back to that in a second. I cut all of that bit on the point.
On the lower point.
Yeah, on the lower point. It's not bad, but if you have a close look, you'll find that it's right. Just compare that with that, the two adjacent. If you have a really close look, you'll see the this one, which was cut above the point, is actually a bit smoother than that one. The other thing that comes into play is that this one's going to tend to be more level because the curve tends to fare in, or if it's a straight surface like that, the planing it above the short point is automatically tends to fare it and make it smooth, whereas this one has little tiny bumps probably as well. So just compare the two. Put your reading glasses on.
Is it running
Now,
handle?
can you, without having anything mounted there, can you demount the wood for just a moment and then set that skew back up on the rest and show us the actual attitude? So you're keeping the surface absolutely flat.
No, I'm not
I mean, the
actually.
flattest.
It's not actually. I'll put the wood on. I think you'll be able to see it a little easier. And take it off later on if you want me to. But.
I was just wondering how it was laying on the actual rest itself, the tool itself. If you've got it.
I'm really glad you're asking this question because I think this kind of thing is what gets to the bottom of it. We want to really get to the bottom of the engineering process that's happening here, without trying to use too many technical terms. I want to try and really understand what's happening. Okay, now it's not actually dead flat on the rest. Can you see up there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
I only raise it a little bit like that. Can you see the difference?
Okay.
Comes up a
All
bit.
right.
I want to do what John said. I want to keep the bevel rubbing as much as possible. And you don't have to have the bevel rubbing, but it does mean that it's safer, more control. You're likely to get a digging. The more you come off the bevel, the more chance you've got of digging. Now I'll do it the wrong way. I'm going to come off the bevel and I'll see if I can get away with it. Just watch to see whether it comes off the rest. Right, now I can come up here. I'm coming up a long way. This is a bad technique because it's up too far, but I can still do it, right? But it's hazardous. It's silly. Better to keep that bevel rubbing more close to it, only a degree or so above, and you'll find that you cut down your problem. So what I'm doing, I've got the bevel rubbing now, and I'm cutting close to a tangent. I'll raise the handle just that few millimetres, 1/8 of an inch or something until it starts to cut. Come back again. I'm starting with, the contact is here, right? The contact is there, and I raise the handle until the contact moves onto both points, right? The bevel and the cutting edge. It's only touching the heel, this part here. Keep raising it, now it's touching both points. And that's when I move along. Okay, I think that's really critical. It's very important. What else is important about the way you present the tool? Any other suggestions?
How much of an angle should you have between the work and the tool?
Right.
Should it be
You're on it.
perpendicular?
Absolutely
Should
critical.
the angle be straight down, or should it just be a couple of degrees, or 45, or whatever?
Right, this is really vital. This is the second really vital point. The first one is cutting at a tangent or keeping the bevel rubbing. This is the second one. That ideally should be around about 45 degrees to the axis of the wood. Okay? Not like that, and not like that. Now, it's a compromise. There are advantages and disadvantages going like that or like that, but this way is, I think, the way you will avoid diggings. The way you'll keep control. If you go too much like this, the cut gets very wide, right? And in fact, you can cut along the whole length of the tool. I'll swing it around and I'll show you. If you watch carefully, watch the shavings flying off, and if you want to come and stand up close, you're welcome to. If you stand at the side, if you can't see from where you are. Now, this is hard to control. You tend to get diggings, but I'll try and make a cut which is very wide. You see the shavings coming off almost the whole length? Very hard to control it.
Plus it takes a lot of power to do that. The motor has to have a lot of power to do it.
Yeah, that's true. You can do it. I'll do it in a more controlled way. Right? Depends. The motor will cope, but I could control that one pretty well there because I didn't cut right to the end.
Yeah.
If you cut right to the end, you have this problem here that I just started to have. You can see the big end was coming.
ways, it catches.
Sorry?
As soon as you get into the wood a little ways, it catches.
On the point. And then what happens in slow motion is, it goes like that, it catches, and then it pulls down here,
And you get a spiral.
and it spirals along, right?
Yep.
Now, when I said cut a third of the way along, and you were saying, I think, I'm sorry, I don't know everyone's name here, but gentleman at the back here. Right, you were saying you like to cut up here, were you? Was that you?
No, Gary.
No, I like to cut up on top of the wood. No, the piece of wood. I mean, a lot of people try to cut down in through
Oh,
here.
I see, you're cutting up,
I get
you have the
more up
tourist
over here.
higher. Yeah,
And I
right.
seem to have better luck that way.
I think that may be coincidence in your case. It's probably because you're taller and you actually feel more comfortable with the tourist higher. If a person is shorter and the lid is set up high like this, then they will actually find it easier to have the tourist a bit lower, I think, because the reason is this too technical?
No, I
No,
just,
no.
I don't want to sort of do what's inappropriate here. I've lost my history thing here, but it doesn't
This is
matter.
great.
If people often say, how high should the tourist be? Now, it should be at a height which is comfortable for you, right? It's different for different people. When I cut, I want to be able to have my hand down about there. If it's up here, it's a lot more awkward for me, that kind of angle with my elbow. So I like to have it down there. And I don't want it down there. That's sort of a strain on my back. I've got to actually compensate, to get down there. So around about here is about right.
I thought it had to be, the height was determined by its relationship with the workpiece as opposed to your body.
It is a bit. If it's a larger diameter here, then that changes the height of the tourist. If this gets real big, well, I've got one here that we can compare it with. That's larger in diameter. If I'm turning this one, I would probably have to raise the tourist a little bit in order to get a good control. If it's comfortable for you, you've got maximum control here, then I think it's the best way. Now, you can do it other ways. In Japan, they turn like this.
Really?
And I find that extremely awkward. And also they have a long tourist overhang with long tools. So I think that kind of overhang is awkward. In fact, sometimes they have that overhang and they have a tool out here. Now, the one tiny movement here means a big movement here. So how they control the tool, I do not know. It takes extraordinary skill, and I don't think it's the easiest way to do it. I don't want to put them down, they've obviously got hundreds, maybe thousands of years of tradition there, and I'm not putting them down, but I think in terms of ease of control, the way having a shorter overhang and holding it down here is the best way to go. Now, coming back to your question about the height of or your point about the height of the tool rest, it's high, you're tall, so it's a bit easier for you when it's up high. If you're a shorter person, you want it down lower so that you can still keep that same kind of zone. The diameter here varies. Sometimes the leg is fatter and sometimes it's thinner. So you actually, to keep your tool rest set at the same height, you will be moving up and down a bit. So there's no exact perfect position, like that's not perfect because that's okay and that's okay. But you've got a bit of a zone there where you can move in comfortably without straining your back. So I would say just somewhere around here, roughly 30 degrees down below horizontal, something like that, is about right. And that will allow you to turn something where the diameter variations are small. If the diameter variations are from that down to that, then you'll have to adjust your tool rest. It's too hard to, you'll find that you go like this and like that. It's not worth it, you may as well adjust the tool rest. But for small variations in diameter, set it up round about there and you're away.
Question.
Yep.
What would happen if this was to be a steeper angle and cut square, and couldn't you use either direction?
Yeah, you can.
I just wondered who started the double bevel.
I don't know the answer to that, but it's got a lot of advantages having the double bevel if you want to turn a bead. We're talking at the moment about smoothing, that is this action. That's all I'm talking about at the moment, but if you want to turn beads, then having this double bevel, this is a little bit high for me now, I'm up here, it's getting to the limits. The double bevel allows me to do this very easily.
Well, the double bevel also mentioned so you can go either direction.
Yeah, now, and that comes back to the other point you're raising about what angle it should be ground at. If this one is ground a little bit differently from this one. Can you see the difference between them? Not just the size, but the angle. This one comes down about 70 degrees, and this one comes down about 60. There's not a lot of difference, but that has an implication for the way you present it. If I want to keep a 45-degree angle between the cutting edge and the axis of the lathe, then I find that if it was square across, is there a carpenter's chisel here? You got a carpenter's chisel I can use as a skew. Yeah, to keep that 45-degree angle, I've got it against my hip here. That gives me extra control. That's another thing to keep in mind when you want to avoid diggings. Have it against your hip. I think you get a lot of control. It's easier to do that and keep that 45 degrees than to do this. I've got my hip out here, you see? To get that 45 degrees, because it's square across, I'm out here and I'm out there.
Yeah.
So that's the reason for that. Well, that's one of the reasons for the skew. For the double bevel, you can actually cut with this. It works fine, but I've got to hold it away from my hip, and I would prefer to have it against my hip. I think you'll find if you do that, it's a lot easier. So, thank you. What I would suggest that if you're going that way, move your hip across and go like that. If you're coming this way, move your hip this way. And come across. Yeah, that brings up another point really about the way you stand. And this isn't absolutely vital, but I think you'll find if you pay attention to the way you stand, it might help a little bit. When we're looking at avoiding dig-ins when smoothing, the really vital things are the 45-degree angle, keeping the bevel rubbing or cutting at a tangent to the circle, I'll get a handout. I've got a handout here. You can pass those around. And cutting a third of the way from the short point. Those three things that are on this handout are the really critical things, cutting here. But the way you stand is important too. Now, what I do and what we recommend to our students is that they stand with their feet pointing at the lathe about shoulder width apart. That allows you to go that way and to go that way just by moving your hips. Now, when you get a bit older, sometimes you don't have that mobility to move your hips as much as that. It may be a bit awkward. But for those of you who can do that, I recommend you really seriously consider it. What most people do when they start woodturning is they stand like this. I don't know if any of you recognise that in yourselves, but if you stand like that, that's okay. But what happens when you want to move along? You've got to shuffle. You've got to move backwards and forwards. Because if you don't, you can't lean back without falling over backwards. If you're leaning forward, you can sort of do it, but you're straining your calf muscles. If you stand facing this way, you've got that mobility. You can actually cut very smoothly, and that's what we want to do. As much as possible, we want the cut to come from your whole body. Now I can actually move the tool along. I could go 12 inches from there all the way along to there without shuffling, because I've got that much movement in my body. And I suggest that it may be awkward at first, but if you can get into the habit of putting your feet shoulder width apart, pointing at the lathe, that gives you a lot of freedom to move for a 12-inch spindle. Or for, whether it's a bowl, it doesn't matter, whether it's face plate work or spindle work, you can do most of the cuts without shuffling your feet. Once you start to shuffle, you're very likely to put little variations in the surface that you're turning. If it's a bowl, you may find a little bump, and that's maybe because of your feet. So I'd recommend that. So what have we covered? The height of the tool rest, feet pointing at the lathe, the way you present the tool. Oh, another thing that makes a big difference with dig-ins is the sharpness of the tool. If the tool's blunt, then you're going to have to push harder, and the grains, the fibres of the wood will stand up, and sometimes they'll be more resistant than others, and you'll get little bumps. Those little bumps are the equivalent of rocking, and that'll create more chance of a dig-in too. So the sharper your tool is, the better. That's one of the reasons why I believe it's worth honing the tool. What I do is I sharpen the tool on the grinder, then I hone it, then I strop it. By stropping it, I normally have a leather strop, but if you don't have leather, you can just use a bit of wood, just like this. Now, without going into detail on sharpening, essentially what's happening there is when you grind it, you put a burr on it. Okay? Each time you press the wheel, you put a burr coming up the other way. Turn around and press that way, the burr comes this way. Then when you hone it, you get rid of that burr, but you put a little one on. And when you strop it, you get rid of the burr again, but you're still leaving a tiny burr, a very tiny one. By the time you've stropped it though, it's not going to be a problem. So that's why that's one of the reasons I'd go to all that trouble, because
Just on the skew or all your tools?
all the tool. Oh, actually no, it's not so easy to strop a gouge. You can strop it that way, but that way it's sort of awkward, so I don't usually bother with the gouge. But what I do when I'm sharpening a gouge, I'm sharpening it like this. Then I go into the flute and sharpen in there. But it's quite important to sharpen inside the flute. Then I come back and I do a very light pass to make the big burr that I've put on it with this action smaller. So I go just very light. And that takes off that big burr and leaves a smaller one on this side. It's reducing it a little bit. It might seem like I'm being too finicky there, but there is a reason. Have any of you seen Richard Raffin demonstrate? Well, Richard doesn't bother with all that.
He just goes to the grinder and uses it that way.
Yep, and that's fine, but the piper must be paid. There's always a price, whichever approach you adopt. My price is that I have to take a little bit longer to sharpen than Richard does, but then I get a better finish. So I can use less coarse sandpaper. I can use finer sandpaper and straight off the tool. So Richard then has to spend more time sanding. I don't know if you'll agree with that, but I would argue the case. I think the way that I do it, you actually get a better finish straight off the tool, and I don't want to sand. I think it's quicker. I actually believe that to get a better component and then cut and reduce your sanding time is quicker than to do what Richard does. He'll probably disagree with that, but yeah, I think it's faster. Secondly, I don't want to breathe in sanding dust, so the less sanding I do, the better it is.
The length of the bevel.
Yeah, okay. I don't, in terms of sharpening it, and again this relates to avoiding dig-ins, the sharper it is, the better it is, the less chance of a dig-in. If you lengthen the bevel, you'll actually make the tool sharper. Now, I think most people in North America that I've seen have their tools ground at more like 40 or 50 degrees. That is this angle here. That combined angle there, that angle is about 40 degrees. It's on most tools, it's more like that. Am I right? Does that look right to you? That looks pretty long, doesn't it, the way I've got it here? That's about 25 degrees. And I reckon that you've got less chance of a dig-in if you have it at 25 degrees than at 40 or 45. Now, if you want to get a 25 degree angle, all you've got to do is make sure that is about twice as long as the thickness of the tool. In practical terms, that tool's a 1/4 inch thick. I want the bevel to be around about 1/2 inch long. I've made mine slightly shorter on this side, partly because if I work very hard woods, I want to have more like 30 degrees, just a little bit different angle. It just means that I keep the edge a little bit longer. It doesn't give quite as smooth a finish, but 25 degrees on very hard woods tends to, you're likely to lose your edge. It's not going to last as long. And that's one of the reasons why people have gone towards 45 degrees, 50 degrees for their tools, because they want to keep the edge. But when you go that far, you've lost sharpness. And try it. If you don't believe me, try it. Get a 45 degree tool and a 25 degree tool, sharpen them both as well as you can, then cut the wood and see if you can see a difference. With some species you won't notice much, but with other species you'll see an amazing difference. And I think it's well worth considering. Okay, I think we've just about covered all the technical issues I can think of.
Making the bevel instead of straight, curving it like Richard does.
Yeah. This comes back to the point I made before. I don't think having a curved bevel will solve the dig-in problem. I think the technical issues about the way you present the tool will solve it. You can have a curve there, but if you have a curve, I would suggest you consider having, trying to keep a sharp point here so that you can still turn beads with, and the same at the top so that you can clear the end of a piece. I want to use that long point to do this. What I'll do is I'll just pass this one around, but I'll compare it with a scrape finish on this end so you can see the difference. Yeah, have a look at the ends and see. Yeah, if you have a curve, we need to draw this. Is there?
Did I put the pins in the bottom of the tray? No, on the, no. They're in the box.
Oh, thanks.
There's a red one in there.
If you have it ground something like 70 or 75 in there, then you'll find that, I think that, well, personally, I think that's the way to go. There's always different ways of, doing this, but I'm not saying it's the only way, but now that gives you a nice angle in there for turning beads. And I'll go into detail later on, not now, but because I don't want to go too much of a lecture all at one time. We'll do some more turning soon. But if you want to turn beads, then you need that kind of shape in there ideally, I think. Now, if you have a curve, that's changed that angle there a bit. And that's the problem with the curve. That you want to be able to cut somewhere, you want that kind of angle for smoothing. I want that 45-degree angle between the cutting edge and the work. So I want that angle in there. That's okay, but then it changes that one. So that's the problem with the curve. It limits the tool so that it's better for smoothing perhaps. I don't even really know if it is better actually. I doubt it. I think it's much the same as a straight one actually if your technique is good. But it means it's not as good for turning a bead. And I want to be able to do both things with the same tool. So that's why I definitely, and it gets worse if you go down here, which is what a lot of people do. Now that is just no good for turning a bead if you want to use the short point. If you want to use the point for turning a bead. Now Bonnie does it differently. Bonnie turns the beads up here. So she's got a different technique again, and it doesn't matter so much for her. The curve wouldn't really bother her as much, I don't think. Does she have a curve on hers? Yeah. Well, that makes sense using the technique that she uses. I would prefer to use...
I think she uses both. She uses both.
But she cuts on the point as well.
No, I mean, she has both straight and curves.
Ah, right. Oh, that's interesting. I'd like to actually get to the bottom of it and find out why she does exactly what she does. Right. Okay, now I think I've talked enough about this, but if you've got... Has anyone got a question before
One
we
more
go on?
question. When your points come in like on that right, it comes in like this.
Yeah.
How much should you have it come in like that?
Oh,
instead
good.
of
That's a good
straight,
point, yeah.
straight
That's a
line?
very important point. I've done that, I've carved them that way just so this point would come out. I actually grind them on a round wheel rather than a flat surface like a belt grinder because when I hone it, I want to hone just there and there. So the curve is actually a real advantage. If you use a belt sander and have it dead flat, when you hone it, you've got to hone the whole surface, and it's very hard. It takes a lot of work.
Either that or you round it off.
You tend to round it off. That's what happens because you get sick of honing flat.
Yeah, you sharpen the very edge of the tool, but
Exactly.
but then what you're doing then is making a round, a convex rather than a convex.
Yeah. So if you round it off, you change the angle, so you lose the 25-degree angle that you're striving for, and secondly,
You lose
next
your
time,
bevel.
and you lose the bevel rub too. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. That's I never thought of that. That's quite true. Good point.
In order for the tool to cut, you've got to raise it and cast the
Yeah.
bevel.
Yeah. Exactly. That would lead to a lot of problems. That would be the explanation for a
The
lot of
more
problems.
you hone it, the worse it gets.
Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, I'm sure that's why a lot of people are having dig-ins then, because the way they're honing it. Yeah. Well, it gets worse too, because the second time you hone it,
Yeah.
you've got to round it a bit more.
Yeah, that's what I mean. The
Because
more you hone it, every time you
the
hone it.
third and fourth time you've changed it completely. So that means that you've got to lift it up more off the bevel in order to cut. So that, yeah, that's I think that's why, that's an explanation for a lot of points, for a lot of diggings. Very, very interesting. Yeah, all right. We'll come back to this. If you've got questions, we'll come back to it later. It's nearly 10:30. Should we stop now? Or?
Yeah, that sounds good. Have a little coffee break,
Okay.
let you sit down.
All right. Yeah, okay. Don't hesitate to come and ask me questions while I have a cup of tea. I want you to get your money's worth, so we'll keep going. But then we'll come back in 10 minutes or so and go on.
I'm just scared to death of a I can leave it the two cents. The problem is that I don't have this.
John, someday when you wanna learn, come up to my shop and I'll help you.
Oh, okay. I think all